Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Okay, so we're pleased to have Martin Novak here. He is from Harvard. He is the director of the program of Evolutionary Dynamics. Evolutionary Dynamics, okay, at Harvard, which is in biology or in mathematics? Or in
both, I mean.
Which is an interdisciplinary program from biology to mathematics. He was at the IAS before coming here. And I'm not sure where you were before the IAS. Oxford. Before
no, before IAS, yes, Oxford. Yes.
Oxford, okay. So, but he's much more of a long-term Cambridge person than we are. So we're very happy that he's coming to speak on 5 mechanisms for evolution of cooperation.
Great, thank you. And it's great for me to be here, and I brought 2 of my most brilliant people who are there, and so I hope that if you like this talk, you will also invite them to give a talk if you really want to get into the details, and also if you ask complicated questions, I might refer it to them. So what I want to discuss here is evolution of cooperation, and we are in this program for evolutionary dynamics. We are all mathematical biologists. And I have told this joke so often that I feel very bad to those who already have heard it, but maybe there are some new people, because what is a mathematical biologist? And it's explained in the following joke. So there is a shepherd and a flock of sheep, and a man comes and says, if I guess the correct number of sheep in your flock, can I have one? And the shepherd says, please try. So the man looks and says instantly 83. And so the shepherd is completely amazed, because it's the right number. So he picks up a sheep, he wants to walk away. He says, hang on, if I guess your profession, can I have my sheep back? What is it? You must be a mathematical biologist. How did you know? Because you picked up my dog. So we actually, so today I want to talk about one topic of this, what we're interested in. So we're interested in mathematical description of evolutionary process, you can say. And we work, for example, on virus infection. We also work on cancer, but we also work on game theory, evolutionary game theory. And the main topic in evolutionary game theory is evolution of cooperation. So here are 2 instances of cooperation. This is an instance of cooperation as it happened as long ago as there was kind of life on Earth. The oldest bacterial fossils that you can actually find, they form these filaments. And in these filaments, some of them die, and then they can fix nitrogen and feed the others with nitrogen. So it's very altruistic of them. And then this is a current example of cooperation. This happened only like 2,000 years ago. That's the Good Samaritan, who is like helping this person. And that's kind of human cooperation. This is a painting by Vincent van Gogh. So then more mathematically, and for those of you working in game theory, you will kind of notice what is cooperation. So the definition of cooperation is that there's a donor and there's a recipient, and the donor pays a cost C and the recipient gets a benefit B. So in a simple way, you can describe it as a 2-parameter game. More generally, you need to have like the prisoner's dilemma payoff matrix, which has like 4 parameters. But cost and benefit are measured in terms of fitness, and reproduction can be genetic or cultural. So when we say evolutionary dynamics, it can be either in terms of genes, or it can be in terms of ideas. So one person has an idea, and another person then adopts it, and so the idea then spreads, like a gene would spread. So I see that you're doing very well, so I want to imitate your strategy. I want to join Microsoft, for example. That's cultural evolution then.
Form a new Microsoft.
Form a new Microsoft. And so then, this is one version of the prisoner's dilemma payoff matrix that you get then with this simple game. Because so this is the game. If you cooperate and if I cooperate, then you get B minus C, because you pay the cost for your cooperation, but you get the benefit from my cooperation. But if only you cooperate and I defect, then you just pay the cost, minus C. But on the other hand, if you defect and I cooperate, you only get the benefit. And if you both defect, it's just 0 here. So you look at this matrix, and you have to make a choice. what would you do? Who wants to cooperate? So this is what you will get here. And you don't know what I will do. And you have to analyze the game in the following way. Suppose, so you don't know what I will do. Suppose I cooperate. If I cooperate, we have to look at what is happening here. So then you get B if you defect, and you only get B minus C if you cooperate. So under the assumption I cooperate, you choose to defect. But here, 0 is greater than minus C, so under the assumption that I defect, you also choose to defect. So no matter what you assume I will be doing, you defect. And now if I analyze the game in the same way, we end up here always, you know. And B is greater than C is greater than 0, so that would have been better. So this smart analysis, kind of what we call rationality in game theory, leads to this bad outcome here. And like if people say, well, I don't care about it, I just try to cooperate, and if the other person would also do it, that they would have been better off. And that's the dilemma. That's why it's called the prisoner's dilemma. So two rational players defect and end up with a low payoff, and two irrational players might cooperate and receive a higher payoff. And the rationality definition here is the one that is used in game theory. You look at the matrix and you make your choice in order to maximize your benefit under. That's basically the Nash equilibrium. The Nash equilibrium here is to defect. And now some people, or in fact many experiments show that people are not rational. People typically they don't behave in a rational way, so who cares what the rationality argument says, you could say. So therefore in biology actually we don't need this rationality assumption. Instead what we have is we have a population of players and we assume some of them are cooperators, some of them are defectors. Then they bump into each other and they get points according to this game. And then you can easily convince yourself that in any mixed population a defector will have a higher payoff than a cooperator. Because if this defector meets that cooperator, it gets more than if that cooperator meets this cooperator. So it's always better to be a defector. So defector have a higher payoff, therefore natural selection pushes the system from any mixed state into the always defect state. So natural selection also wants defection. So I imitate those that have a higher payoff. And so then I will look around and I will realize the defectors have a higher payoff. I will also try to defect. There are different kind of update rules.
Or the defectors survive and they reproduce.
Yeah, genetically. So the interesting thing is here that if you ask what's the average fitness of the population doing, the average fitness is high here and it's lower there and it's lowest there. So average fitness goes down. So natural selection reduces average fitness here. There's the very famous Fisher fundamental theorem of natural selection that states natural selection always increases average fitness. This does not hold in Gent for games. It holds only for constant selection. He was aware kind of this. But this is a game and this is therefore not constant selection. So the fitness depends actually on what composition is there, and therefore this is a violation of Fisher's fundamental theorem of natural selection. But what we see here is that natural selection prefers defection, so we need to give help to get cooperation. So natural selection needs help to favor cooperators over defectors. And the question is, why would we care, right? Why do biologists care about cooperation? And in some sense, wow, that's cut off so badly, you know. So what is up there is evolution needs cooperation to construct new levels of organization. So what I want to say is that evolution, say evolution of antibiotics resistance or some simple change in evolution, or the fundamental equations of evolution, they don't actually have like construction of much more complicated things. Or transitions, say how do you get genomes from genes? How do you get cells? How do you go to multicellular organisms? Once you have individual animals, how do you go to animal societies, like social insects or so? How do you go to human society? So we call this like transitions in biology, or sort of major steps in biology. And for these major steps, there's a kind of construction there, which is unclear a little bit how it happens in the evolutionary equations, and there is no perfect theory for this. But what I want to suggest is that in all of this, there's a kind of cooperation. So you get this, when cells begin to cooperate, you can have multicellular organisms. Or when the animals, insects, start to cooperate, you get social insects, eusociality, for example. So there is cooperation is needed for construction to happen, and therefore we are so interested in cooperation. And so, for example, in a multicellular organism, you can say the cells of the body cooperate to reproduce the germline. And cancer is that they get mutations, and then they just reproduce. They go back to the primitive selfish program of replication. And so cancer is a breakdown of cooperation. And what I want to propose is 5 mechanisms for the evolution of cooperation. And these 5 mechanisms are kin selection, direct reciprocity, indirect reciprocity, spatial selection, group selection. And I want to go through each of them. So kin selection. Kin selection, the interaction occurs between genetic relatives. And there's a famous statement by G.B.S. Holden, one of the founding fathers of population genetics: I will jump into the river to save 2 brothers or 8 cousins. And the coefficient of relatedness between brothers is 1/2, and with cousins is 1/8. And so this is what he kind of anticipated here. And he was also politically very active between the First and the Second World War. He was a dedicated communist. Here he's addressing a group of British workers, presumably not talking about kin selection theory.
Were they his cousins?
I don't know. Why did he bother, right? Why did he care? So then, kin selection, it was really made famous by this man, Bill Hamilton, and I knew him in Oxford, and in his PhD thesis that was published in 1964, he wrote this paper, which many people like very much. And in this paper, there's kind of a rule, which is called Hamilton's rule. And this is what Holden basically said in words. He showed sort of more convincingly or so. So the coefficient of relatedness has to exceed the cost to benefit ratio. So the idea would be there's a gene, and the gene induces you to behave altruistically, and then there's a chance that that gene is also present in my brother or present in my cousin. And that chance is, say, 1/2 or 1/8. That's kind of the story around it, you know. That's kind of the story around it. And the interesting thing is I grew up always knowing that this is an amazing theory. And recently I have begun to doubt it actually very much. So I don't really understand it anymore. And especially I don't subscribe to the universality claim of this theory. So people use mathematical formalism that comes out of this theory to describe almost every kind of interaction here. But this is where then relatedness for me becomes a meaningless concept.
I don't understand any of what you're saying, really.
So
I don't understand the age and
She's going to tweet that, I just want to tell you.
So how does this work with the age and 2? I have not grasped why this is.
So he doesn't understand the kind of low-level explanation of it before you think deeply and reject it. He doesn't get the kind of...
So this is the idea. The idea is the following. The idea is that I have a gene, and this gene asks me to induces me to behave altruistically. So I pay a certain cost. And somebody else gets a benefit. But that somebody else also has a copy of that gene. So this is the selfish gene idea of Richard Dawkins. So this also became famous because of Richard Dawkins' book, The Selfish Gene. On a gene level, the behavior is selfish. On the individual level, the behavior is actually... That's the idea. That's the idea.
If you work it out, the 8 and 2 comes out.
It's just a
The marginal benefit is greater than marginal cost. The marginal benefit is relatedness times E, and the cost is...
So there are many problems with this theory. I don't really want to get into this. The thing is that very early they realized this is not relatedness by descent. So in most examples, you know, it's not this 1/2 or this 1/8. It's something much more complicated. And now we begin to understand this relatedness concept is completely undefined. So we can give 5 different models. For each model, you have to come up with a new idea of what relatedness actually is. And that's for me the problem. This is where it becomes empty. That's my criticism of it, but that's not the topic of my talk, really.
Moreover, this does not have any power for human cooperation.
You know, in my opinion, it would not. You know, in my opinion, it would not. But so the defendants of kin selection theory, they would say there's a cultural relatedness. By the very fact that you're all here at Microsoft, you share some common goals that makes you culturally related. That's what they would like to say. I don't know. No, it's. I come back to this problem maybe later if you're really interested in that. When I talk about group selection, especially these people attack actually group selection, and I defend group selection. Actually, for me, group selection makes a lot of sense. No, that's an argument that was used, say, by Konrad Lorenz, loosely speaking, and that had a lot of fire afterwards. So they showed very, very often that good for the species is typically always a wrong notion. That's very dangerous. It's very dangerous to use the argument good for the species. So, for example, Konrad Lorenz would say, males fight, but they don't kill each other. That's good, because if they would kill each other, that's bad for the species. That's a wrong argument, you know, because if there's a male that kills the other male, maybe it has more mates. So you need to analyze it on the individual. You need to analyze it on the individual level. And so this very problem led John Maynard Smith actually to study evolutionary game theory by fighting behavior. And so. But so the kin selection theory, let's go to the next theory. The next theory is direct reciprocity. And direct reciprocity was invented by Robert Trivers in a paper in 1971. And this is him in 1971 sleeping surrounded by his books. And this is him a few years ago when he visited my institute. But this is a landmark paper. Verbally, he describes the idea. You know, he doesn't really calculate anything there. He just writes a very long paper talking about it and then citing some examples of, say, cleaner fish and so on. But the idea is there's a repeated interaction. And I help you, then maybe you help me. Yeah, it's a repeated game. So the prisoner's dilemma that I discussed in the beginning, it was non-repeated. So the rational analysis of the non-repeated game is defection. But if we allow the possibility of repetition, the rational analysis does no longer work. And this was realized by economists in what is called the Folk theorem. And the Folk theorem essentially says that it would work in the following way. I could somehow signal to you, if you start to defect with me once, I will switch to defection forever. And therefore, you get very low outcome. And therefore, it might be in your best interest not to defect. Yes?
I think this idea makes a lot of sense for intelligence. It's a bit harder for cell-level organisms.
Yeah, so therefore, I have other mechanisms for evolution of cooperation also. So that's good, you know, I want that. But it has been studied in animals, you know.
You need to recognize the
very good.
A cell can always appear exactly like other cells.
Well, humans also. Real people, real defectors don't look like defectors. It's
Madoff looked just like everybody else, right?
Maybe more trustworthy than most other people, you know. It's like, but let's go into the theory and let's see what the complication really is. So that's a repeated prisoner's dilemma. We have two players and we play this game. And then the economists kind of knew that there was a chance to get cooperation, but they didn't actually know how to play the game. I mean, they didn't really know what's the winning strategy. So political scientist Robert Axelrod in like the 70s had this great idea, let's have a computer tournament. So it was the great days of chess computer tournament. So he wanted to have a prisoner's dilemma computer tournament. So he said, submit strategies to me. They will play against each other. Every strategy plays every other strategy about 200 times, and I will add up the points. And then he gets 14 submissions in his first tournament, and then he had it, and some of them were smart strategies. You know, they tried to use Bayesian prediction what the other one would be doing. They tried to deceive the other one, and so. The simplest program of all was just 3 lines, and the simplest program won. And that was submitted by the well-known game theorist Anatol Rappaport, who had written a book about the prisoner's dilemma in 1965, Rappaport and Chama, and it was a 3-line program. And it's called Tit-for-tat. Start with cooperation, If you cooperate, I will cooperate. If you defect, I will defect. So I start with a cooperation, and then I do what you did last time. So therefore, you don't actually realize it somehow, but you're playing yourself one round removed. It's like I'm holding up a mirror, and whatever you do now, I do next time. This strategy won. So then he published it, and people were very interested. And then he had a great idea, you know. The idea was, let's have another tournament. And then he got 63 entries. And many people analyzed the first tournament very carefully and submitted strategies in order to beat Tit-for-tat. Also, John Maynard Smith submitted a strategy for the second tournament. Only
so
one.
Referential, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It's complicated. That's right. It's complicated. So then, only one person submitted Tit-for-tat. It was Rappaport again, and Rappaport won again. So he also won in the new environment, you know, because it's possible to calculate the best strategy against the known set of opponents, but then you introduce the new strategies and you don't know how to play that, you know. No, there are all sorts of many different types of strategies.
The problem was that nobody else, you know, there was only one tit-for-tat. If there were many tit-for-tats, then some of these strategies would be done better.
No, sure, in many other tournaments, other things could have happened. You know, and the interesting thing is Axelrod actually sent me his payoff matrix. If you think of it, that tournament, the end result is a 63 by 63 payoff matrix. Or the first one was a 14 by 14 payoff matrix. So now we can look with our evolutionary methods who wins in that game. And it wouldn't be Tit-for-tat actually. So only if you because in a game you don't just add up the total payoff over the rows. You know, you want to know, for example, what is a Nash strategy, what can invade it by something else. You wouldn't conclude that Tit-for-tat is the winner by other normal sort of methods other than just by adding up the, which I find interesting. But in any case, that basically ignited now this field. So then 3,000 papers were published sort of in philosophy and in everywhere, and people got really interested in this, and people studied Tit-for-tat in sticklebacks, for example, in fish, there's Tit-for-tat-like behavior, and in students and so on.
Which ones are more involved?
After the 3,000 papers, what do we know?
So that's right. So this is when I began. You know, this is 3,000 papers before I even began. You know? So then there was one problem known, you know, because I haven't yet even begun. You know, so this one problem that was known is that Tit-for-tat is unforgiving. So errors destroy cooperation. So now I have a bad day and I defect, and then you defect. And then because I'm playing Tit-for-tat, I will defect, you know. And then after some time I might have another bad day, and then we move like this. So in a long game, it's very easy to calculate Tit-for-tat against Tit-for-tat. It's just like playing randomly. As bad as flipping a coin every day when you get up. No, so this is what I assume. Errors in both directions, and you can calculate very easily that this is just a random payoff for a long game, if the game is long enough. So this is my PhD thesis, and my PhD advisor had this idea, Carl Sigmund. The idea was the following. In Axelrod's tournament, there were not really errors. We wanted to study a world where errors were sort of there. So we also wanted to have natural selection designing a strategy, where we have a search space for strategies, and when we start with a random ensemble of strategies, and then they play against each other, and whatever does well reproduces, but mutation introduces new strategies. So the advantage of this is we can have errors in the system, we can have mutation, we can have selection. The disadvantage is that we must a priori have a particular search space. You can't say, I consider the set of all strategies. And at that time, the computers were not as fast as now. And so the first strategy I considered, it was just strategies that respond to the last move. Probabilistic strategies that respond to the last move. Later, people have gone to 2 or 3 moves, more or less finding similar things. But I would love to know whether now, actually, we could study longer memory in an efficient way. That would be cool, you know.
Bayesian setting, people have studied this, starting with Green and Porter, and then Abreu-Christ and Sticchetti. But in a Bayesian setting, so that you actually know what the error distribution is, you can kind of find optimal strategies or strategies to support cooperation. But selection.
Yeah, so what happened in our setting was we start with a random ensemble of strategies, and then natural selection soon favors always defect. So if the opposition isn't organized, the best thing is to defect. And the great thing is that this wasn't over, because for my PhD thesis it didn't end here. That was good, so something else happened, something really interesting happened, and this was that Tit-for-tat then invaded. So we found that Tit-for-tat, so if basically many people are really defectors, and then there are few Tit-for-tatters emerging kind of by chance or so, and they can actually do well because they cooperate with each other and they defend themselves against the defectors by switching to defection rapidly. So at that time we didn't really understand mathematically how this invasion works, but now we have a framework where we in finite populations we can study the probability that Tit-for-tat invades a population here, and we can actually show that it is favored by selection. We can show that Tit-for-tat behaves as if it was an advantageous mutant in a finite population of always defect players. See, in that relationship, always defect is still a Nash equilibrium. It's a strict Nash equilibrium, actually. But in a finite population, the property of strict Nash doesn't actually protect you against invasion. This is one of our findings, which we find is cool. In a finite population, other criteria matter. So we come here with Tit-for-tat, and now the great thing is that it didn't just stop here. Very quickly, Tit-for-tat was replaced. Tit-for-tat was replaced because other strategies were generated, and it was replaced by generous Tit-for-tat. And what is generous Tit-for-tat? Generous Tit-for-tat is, if you cooperate, I cooperate. And if you defect, then I will cooperate with a certain probability. And you can calculate in a simple setting what would be this maximum probability of forgiveness such that you are resistant against invasion by always defect. So if you're too forgiving, you can be exploited. So there is a maximum level of forgiveness. This maximum level of forgiveness is actually a very simple function of these two parameters. This is not really the...
And then this is resistant to errors also then, obviously.
Well, so the way how we have it is, if we say, I always cooperate, I mean 1 minus epsilon, there's an error rate there. There's always an error rate. But, of course, yes, that's right. It's resistant against errors in itself, yes. Right. So this evolution of forgiveness. So what I like, and therefore I have a Templeton grant, because we talked about this. So we have in a strict natural selection setting, the winning strategy it can forgive. Yeah.
Question. So the Templeton grant is very interesting. I have a question in a different direction. The entropy of your thing, did it go up or down?
The entropy?
Yeah. Well, you have more structure development, so you might think that this contradicts the second law that entropy should go up.
So how do you calculate the entropy here, Christian? The entropy of the string or what? As a bit string? I mean, how are you calculating entropy?
Well, maybe how... So the more random I play, the more entropy I have. But the entropy of the distribution, what you see.
There are people who have searched in evolutionary dynamics for things like entropy, but in vain. I would love to find something like the second law of thermodynamics. I've never seen it, and people have claimed it, but it wasn't convincing. There are many different instantiations of this, what we do now. Now we are studying these things much more carefully than what I did then, But essentially you can imagine the following thing. You have a population of n players. Everybody plays everybody else. So you calculate deterministically the payoff. And then you have, you pick an individual for reproduction proportional to payoff, and you pick another individual for death. This is what we call frequency-dependent Moran process. Another update rule would be pairwise comparison. Pairwise comparison is everybody has fitness, and now we compare each other, and if your fitness is higher than mine, I adopt your strategy with a certain probability.
But the key thing here is, and I think what makes this, maybe more relevant for economics than biology, is you're keeping these people playing for a long time together. It's not like a large population. I play somebody and then for once, and then I go back into the pool and I do another draw. So in draw you play for a long time and then you do another. So then the memory doesn't come into it. So if you wanted to play this in a large population, all of these things would require memory, which is, again, would require greater sophistication than.
No, if you think about what cognitive functions are needed here to play this game, is I have to play simultaneously with a fairly large number of people and keep the game in mind. And that requires a cognitive sophistication, which I find interesting. But it's maybe beyond what simple animals can do.
So for instance, if the kind of the genes or the bacteria are in a confined place, they're playing each other all the time, that makes sense. If it's like simple animals in a large population, they're playing each other randomly matched, then it's harder to have keeping in mind.
So this depends on planet population. What happens as the size of the population grows?
So this is also what we know only recently. This is not from then. This is like from Deepa's and Corinna's work and Dave. What we find is the following thing. There is a parameter which is called the intensity of selection. And the intensity of selection is essentially, it measures, so weak intensity of selection is the following thing, is we all have more or less the same payoff. We all have, our payoff is 1 plus W times what we get from this game. And the parameter W is the intensity of selection. And in the limit of W to 0, all have more or less the same payoff. And the game is just a small perturbation of our fitness here. That's weak selection. And strong selection is that whatever we get from the game, that's our fitness. And now the population size times the intensity of selection. If you make this small, you have random drift. If you make this large, you go to rationality. So you go to deterministic classical evolutionary game theory, which usually coincides with the rational analysis. And this is what we find so interesting, because we can now tune this parameter and fit what people are really doing.
So you have a transition from one.
Yes, a continuous. Yes, continuous. So, for example, you have a game like the ultimatum game, and here the rational analysis is not the same as what people are playing in the lab. So we started in our new framework with intensity of selection, and for strong intensity of selection, we get the rational answer. And as we move to weak intensity of selection, we get to what people are actually doing. And this I find so cool, and this idea of intensity of selection, I introduced this here in 2004 in a paper, and it wasn't used in economics. I've also worked with Drew Fudenberg on this. Economists, they didn't have such a parameter, I think, because it's not so common to think about this. So there's one game is being played, and the performance of this game that's your success. That's what it's about. That's the economic analysis. But in biology, very often, in genetics, for example, very often we assume that the fitness is a small. So we have the weak intensity of selection is a very natural limit for biologists. Also, once you are in this weak intensity of selection, the question is, what's the point of reference? And here in economics, there isn't the same natural reference as in biology, because in biology the reference is neutral evolution. So neutral evolution is everybody has the same fitness. And if I introduce a new mutant in a population, the probability it will take over is 1 over the population size. So then the fixation probability of a mutant compared to 1 over the population size is for us the natural criterion. And when I started to work on this with Fudenberg, he had these two questions. Why do you consider weak intensity of selection? And why do you compare with 1 over m? And because of that, you actually make so much progress here. That's kind of the new idea. But I'm diverting from the talk. That would be another talk to give. Yeah.
In social games, that weak measurement is limited.
Intensity of selection.
Intensity of selection has to do with the cognitive limit.
No, so I think about it in the following way. Because it could be that we are playing many games. And right now, this game that we are analyzing right now is just one of many games. And this is a way to get weak selection. Because on average, we have the same fitness from all of these games, and right now we're studying the small contribution that this game makes. But another way to get weak selection is the following. In pairwise comparison, for example, I compare myself with what you are doing and then I want to adopt your strategy. But in reality, people, as a biologist, this is what I want to submit, you know, typically they don't know what they are doing. So typically people don't know what's going on, you know. I'm not even aware what the game is right now. So say investment decisions even, you know. How do I know how I should allocate my money? I mean, many experiments show that it is fairly much random decisions. So this is also a way to get actually weak intensity of selection. I don't know what your strategy is. I don't really know what your payoff is. So there are many ways to justify weak selection. But this was it.
So I was thinking of it like I just don't have enough effort to think that strongly to be really sort of rational in this one game because I play.
That's also good. That's good. Yeah, that's good. That's a good way also to think about it. So we are at this state now, random, always defect Tit-for-tat, generous Tit-for-tat. So the world is kind of becoming better, which is good, you know. And now something kind of surprising happened. Generous Tit-for-tat didn't stay. It was actually replaced by always cooperate.
And then your Templeton grant went up.
Yes, yeah, maybe, but so what is this? What's this replacing here, you know? If everybody here plays generous Tit-for-tat, this means everybody is very nice and sometimes defects if the other person defects. And if I play unconditional cooperation, this is always cooperate. So I'm very naive, you know. I always cooperate. You know, I have no disadvantage in this world of nice people. So this is random drift. You know, everybody has the same fitness in this world, and this is like birds that come to an island where there are no predators. They lose their ability to fly. So neutral drift gets you here without any fitness. So you oscillate back and forth, and after some time you're here. Yes.
Generous Tit-for-tat, you said that the optimal probability of playing cooperate when somebody defects was Q plus 1 minus C or D. I was wondering how you came up with that number.
It's not the optimal. I would love to be able to calculate the optimum value.
It seems like always cooperate is the same with Q equal to 1 or 0.
That's right, exactly right. It's the same with Q equal to 1. And what I gave you, the probability, it was the maximum probability such that always defect does not dominate this strategy. Generous Tit-for-tat is dominated by always defect if this probability is too high. But if there is a range of population of players where you increase this probability, random drift basically gets you there. In some sense, a biological trait which is not under pressure goes out. And the biological trait that goes out here is to know what to do if somebody defects. So they forget what to know because nobody defects. So you drift here. But once you are here, you can guess what happens next.
But in the original prisoners with the liver problem, wasn't the cost C higher than D, and Q is only really stable, and C is less stable?
No. The benefit must be greater than C. Benefit greater than cost, cost greater than 0. That's what we need for a prisoner's dilemma. Otherwise, the game is not a prisoner's dilemma. So we need B greater than C.
So that's unstable.
So that's right. So always cooperate. Now you invite the invasion of defectors, and you have a mathematical model of human history because these are oscillations sort of good and bad people. It's like war and peace, you know. And yes. The choice. So you mean this thing here? Now, how do I calculate this? So I just ask what's the maximum Q such that generous Tit-for-tat is still a Nash equilibrium compared to always defect. Can resist invasion. But this is not the optimum level of forgiveness. You know, in a recent model we have numerically the optimum level of forgiveness, and I was hoping that Corina can calculate it because we have a theory where we could calculate it. This is not the optimum level of forgiveness. I would like to know.
Optimum in what are you trying to optimize?
So then the strategy space here is this unit square. Is I respond to what the other person did last, so I have a probability P to cooperate after the opponent has cooperated, a probability Q to cooperate after the opponent has defected. So my strategy space is the unit square, my evolutionary dynamic gives me a distribution on the strategy space. This distribution has two peaks. One is near all D, and one is near general tit-for-tat. I want to calculate that other peak. And that I would call the optimum, yes?
So our conflict with another somewhat generous strategy in F1 was playing Tit-for-tat.
Yeah, that was Maynard Smith. Maynard Smith submitted this strategy for the second tournament. It didn't win. It would have won the first tournament. And the advantage of Tit-for-tat is that if I realize that you're doing this, I can alternate CD, CD, CD. So generous Tit-for-tat is actually better than this. It can't be exploited so easily. No, well, only if, well, I don't know, but some very smart people submitted strategies that.
There is a Markov channel of population, right? Population of the This is what's going on, right? You start with some and then build them up.
You have oscillations, yeah.
Yeah, so the Markov channels in general, you know, they mix. Yeah. So this is periodic behavior, right?
So I mean, if you want to think of it as a Markov process, you know, on a strategy space, then you would have a distribution. You would have a stationary distribution. The stationary distribution can have a shape where the weights are on the edges. And then the underlying dynamics would have these oscillations.
But is that stable? I mean, so, you know, you could also imagine a situation in which something mixed could be stable. So you can have a situation in which...
That depends on the mutation rate. So if I make the mutation rate between strategies large, I get a stationary distribution on the strategy space which has a peak in the middle. And if I make it small, it can have peaks in the corners. And then these corners can have transitions. But these are all things I didn't know then, you know. I only know this from our very recent work. You know.
So should I think of this as almost like metastable? So I have my 4 peaks, I will stay in this corner, and then I will go...
Yeah, this is how we see it now. For low mutation rate, this is how these games look like, yeah. And I should say that in most models for evolution of cooperation, you know, that we've ever analyzed, we have these cycles. We never typically have models where there's just one thing and it's stable and that's it. It's always that the success of a strategy depends on how long can it defend itself and how quickly can it come back once it has been destroyed.
So it is a metastable.
Yeah, very much.
Do you have a mathematical proof for this cycle, or is that a numerical observation?
Oh, no, I can study that system, you know, on the simplex S4, for example, and we can describe in the stochastic process how these transitions work.
But wait, if you have sort of n players, there's not just a simplex; it's a much more complicated. If you really want to study
four strategies, n players. You know, you're on the simplex. You're essentially on a discrete version of the simplex S4. If you want to go to a continuous strategy space, which I actually did here, you know, then we have another theory that tells you how to calculate the stationary distribution on the continuous strategy space. But that's right. So then you ask, what's the that's right. So there are different things. So for example, you can calculate the average frequency of a strategy in the stationary distribution, which is not the same as the entire stationary distribution. So then we expanded the strategy space. You know, I was very happy now with this was basically discovery of generous Tit-for-tat evolution of forgiveness, but I wanted to confirm the success of this in a slightly bigger strategy space. And the bigger strategy space is now I will take into account what happened in the last round, not just what you did in the last round. So I might behave differently if it was CC, CD, DC, and DD. So I have now 4 probabilities to cooperate after these 4 outcomes. These are memory 1 strategies, as opposed to reactive strategies. We call these reactive strategies. So let's go to memory 1. So in memory 1, we actually found there was another strategy that did much better than generous Tit-for-tat, which made me very unhappy in the beginning, because this was my champion, and I wanted to change things so it wouldn't actually, but it always won, you know. And so then I started to think about what is this other strategy, and this is what this other strategy is. And this strategy is win, stay, lose, shift. And win, stay, lose, shift essentially comes in when the population is fairly cooperative, and then it's much more stable. It hangs around for a long time, and by some unknown route, eventually it gets also wiped out, and I have never really understood how. It's just an accumulation of more strategies in this computer simulation. So that's something I would really love to study, how you lose win, stay, lose, shift, and then the cycle starts again.
Wait, what is the strategy?
Yeah, what's the strategy? That's the strategy. If I'm doing well, then I will repeat my move. And if I'm doing badly, then I will change my move. So if I'm doing well, what is well, what is badly? This is the aspiration level. So you have a family of strategies that have aspiration levels, and that is the right aspiration level for this particular game. So I'm satisfied with B or B minus C, but I'm unsatisfied with 0 and with minus C. So this means if we both cooperate, I'm happy and I will cooperate. But if I defect and you cooperate, I'm even more happy, I will try to defect again. But if we both defect, I will switch to cooperation. So this strategy here, this strategy is actually, it's a deterministic rule to correct mistakes. So Tit-for-tat has this weakness of not correcting mistakes. Generous Tit-for-tat is a stochastic rule to correct mistakes. That's a deterministic rule to correct mistakes.
And it's more stable.
Yes, that's right.
Longer or stable for a longer period.
Yes, stable for a longer period. So if BC is greater than 2, then actually that strategy is stable against invasion by always defect. If that's not the case, you need a stochastic version of this strategy that does the job for you. And that stochastic version is that if we both defect, I have a probability less than 1 of actually switching to cooperation. But there is a paper by Fudenberg and Muskin where they actually analyzed the repeated prisoner's dilemma, and they have certain aspects there of what they call weak evolutionary stability, and in that paper they actually show that this strategy and not Tit-for-tat is a candidate for this weak notion of evolutionary stability. So it's kind of known that Tit-for-tat-like strategies could never be evolutionarily stable in some sense, whereas that strategy can. So
this is already 2 levels away from tit-for-tat.
it's a bit, well, I wouldn't even say it's more complicated.
Generous tit-for-tat is,
Yeah, generous tit-for-tat
it
is,
has some randomness
yeah.
in it, and this has.
Well, so the question is this a more complicated strategy than Tit-for-tat or less complicated? That's up to you, because all I need to monitor is my own payoff, and then I change accordingly. So I don't even have to remember what you did. I just monitor my own payoff. It's very simple strategy.
So how would you kind of apply this to, say, for example, the emergence of the genome?
No, that I have different mechanisms for different things. I don't think genes are playing the repeated prisoner's dilemma. For me, that's more interested for humans. So I have these 2 things where I'm very interested in human behavior, and we can talk about other things later. That I wouldn't go so far. I wouldn't go.
But if it's for humans, I think it's not like, I think this is quite plausible because it's simple, but there, it's not clear whether humans could play a little more rational. They couldn't, for example, switch partners. For instance, if I'm playing with Jennifer and Jennifer is cheating, then
Yeah, we call this quit-for-tat. That exists.
Have even more memory than like 1 level memory.
Okay, yeah. So some people have tried to go to higher memory. For me, it's an open-ended game. I don't say now the analysis is finished, especially for the following reason, because now this strategy does very well, and it also does very well in higher memory. I thought now more or less that's it. But then I asked myself the following thing. In this game, what are we doing? It's a repeated prisoner's dilemma where both people move simultaneously. So you and I, we move at the same time. I thought it would be very natural to also ask what happens if we move alternatingly, the asynchronous prisoner's dilemma or alternating prisoner's dilemma. And so then I simulated the alternating prisoner's dilemma. And in the book of Axelrod, it's actually written, it doesn't matter whether you play it one way or the other. When I talked to Fudenberg, actually, he had never thought about the alternating game. He couldn't even understand why I would call it prisoner's dilemma. And I had like several sessions with him to convince him that it's worth to analyze it. But what we find for the alternating game is I have not yet found a win-stay-lose-shift-like strategy that plays well in the alternating game.
Well, that's a matter of memory. So with enough memory, they are indeed equivalent. Right? If you allow people to have infinite memory, they are entirely equivalent.
No, it's a different game. The two games are different.
No, they are different, but for high discount factor and infinite memory,
High discount factor.
you know, because the difference is that when I cheat, when I cheat, I get the payoff immediately, whereas
Then try to formulate a win-stay-lose-shift strategy for the alternating game that does well and is error correcting. I would love to see that because. So I have been unable to find a win-stay-lose-shift strategy for the alternating game.
for example, you could take periods and stochastically put them
It doesn't seem to be successful. But if you can find it, that would be great. Then it would be finished. Because so far what I have is that in the alternating game we are back to generous Tit-for-tat. In the alternating game I only find generous Tit-for-tat, not these win-stay-lose-shift like strategies. But if you find a way because I also think it should be possible. But I'm surprised by the statement it's the same. I mean I don't find it. If I consider memory one strategies, they are very different games.
with infinite memory or with long enough memory.
Yeah, I would love to see that. That would be great. Because then you could actually get win-stay-lose-shift in that world also. That would be amazing.
So is the axolotl competition still going on?
So the axolotl competition, if you think about it, you submit people to play one round. In evolution, the one round is the time zero. Then you reproduce, then you play again, then you reproduce, then you play again. That's different. It's very different. It's sort of in an evolutionary analysis, we wouldn't ask what's the winning strategy in the first round. It would be homogeneous, you mean?
Yeah. So I mean, if you, maybe this is only because your population is mixing so well, right? So if everyone plays everyone, then you sort of expect.
It's a mean field.
But so that comes later, that's my next model.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, that's my next model. That's my next model. Okay. But I have to actually so I have one more mean field model, and then I have the evolutionary graph theory. So then, nevertheless, so this for me it's an open-ended world, but there's one simple rule there. A simple rule, which we had before. The simple rule, I like simple rules. Evolution of cooperation in direct reciprocity is only possible if the probability of another round is greater than the cost-to-benefit ratio. And that's actually not hard to show. So I mean, no matter how complicated everything here actually is, if you really want to know something, but that must be true for evolution of cooperation to be possible. And cost-to-benefit ratio, that's just one parameter actually. CP, it's just one parameter. It always depends on the ratio. And so then this critical thing for the game, it has to be greater than the cost-to-benefit ratio. So I will present 5 mechanisms with these 5 rules, and we will see how it gets a bit more complicated in the end. But I hope I have like another 2 hours or so. So we have indirect reciprocity now, the next thing. This guy here, the Good Samaritan, presumably he did not do this because he thought this is the first round of a prisoner's dilemma. Next time he will help me, when I'm like that. Maybe he didn't do it for that reason. We don't know what the reason was, But the indirect reciprocity is the idea that I help you and somebody might help me. So how does it work? Direct reciprocity, direct reciprocity, repeated encounters. Yeah, that's right. I help, say, you, and Templeton helps me. I don't know. So repeated encounters between the same 2 individuals. My strategy depends on what you have done to me. This is how I want to define direct reciprocity. Whenever we have a repeated game between the same 2 individuals, and my strategy depends on what has happened in the previous outcomes, and also on what you have done to me. Indirect reciprocity is also repeated encounters, but now in a population of individuals. And my strategy also depends on what you have done to others. So here, basically...
No, not on what others have done to me, but on what you have done to others.
That's right. So I look at somebody, and before I play the game, you know, I will ask myself, what has this person done? Is this a cooperator?
You need a lot of memory to do that. I mean, if I just have to keep track of what the world has done to me, that's one thing. But if I have to keep track of
exactly right.
what you have done to everybody
yes,
else,
exactly
that's
right.
a lot of memory.
That's right. That's what I want. You know, that's what I want. Because
I do that in real life. I try.
yes, very good. Yeah, Cantori did this analysis before I did it. Something, but it's not.
It's a different one. So Kanduri's one is that you don't need any memory. It's just it's a finite population, and if you cheat, then cheating is going to spread through the population and ultimately it's going to hurt you.
So that's the path.
But
for any finite population,
this is
there exists a discount factor that, or
but
a discount factor greater than.
no, Cantori did an important paper on indirect reciprocity. One of the rules we actually studied this game, we call it Cantori. That's something, a rule that he proposed there. But this is what I want to say. I like the complexity here because ultimately we want to get humans. You know, we want to get smart people in evolution. You know, you have to ask what's the selection pressure for humans. And what I want to say that these games, you know, they have a selection pressure for social intelligence and for language. So in order to keep track, we have to talk about each other. And what do we do all the time? Gossip. We talk about each other. So like, I mean, they have been going up and down in trains, you know, and recorded conversations of other people. And like 60% of conversations, it was gossip about other people. It's the, so here's the way how indirect reciprocity works. It works via reputation. So there is, for example, an encounter where A helps B, and there's an encounter where A doesn't help B. And others are somehow observing this. And so to help somebody, that costs something. So if I cooperate, I pay a cost, and the recipient gets a benefit. And if I defect, I have no cost, and the other guy has no benefit. But there's a kind of reputation score. I mean, the others assign reputation score where this goes up and this goes down. Ultimately, when you calculate the evolutionary dynamics, you know, in some sense, you could say it is ultimately, I mean, the success of the strategy is being calculated in this way.
Why is there anything new here? It's memory, right? It's just more memory. It's memory. No, you remember that you all the next
So let me explain what's going on here. There is a strategy. What is a strategy of indirect reciprocity? A strategy of indirect reciprocity has two components. An assessment norm, a social norm, and an action rule. So the social norm is, I see Jennifer cooperating with him. So I know, for example, his reputation is good. Cooperating with a good person is good. Cooperating with a bad person, that depends on the social norm, maybe good or bad. You know, that's the difference in the social norm. See, so if you defect with somebody who is good, maybe that's bad. But if you defect with somebody who is bad, maybe that's good. So that's the social norm. How do I evaluate the interaction between others? And then the action rule is, now I'm the donor, and do I cooperate or defect with this person whose norm is like this? That's the action rule. So the game is very different from a repeated prisoner's dilemma. Much more complicated.
So you're going to talk about vindictiveness and things like that later on, or?
No.
Because one of the things that Ernst Fair and his colleagues in these experiments that they're finding is that people seem to get pleasure both.
Yeah, no, I don't. So punishment. No, that's so then.
Punishing people who.
Yeah, so I don't like that. Actually, no, I don't like it.
Okay, so I would like to hear why you don't like that.
So then that's a. So you have to invite like Tibor, Corina, but for this you have to invite Dave Rand in my group. He works so that experimentally, and so why don't I like punishment? For me, punishment is not the solution. Punishment is the problem. You know, so the real solution is.
You're a nice guy, Ernst. You've really been brainwashed by Temple. He's also Austrian,
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, I know that. But the other side of Austria.
The other side.
No, there's this little part of Austria, you know, which is tiny. It's called Vorarlberg. It's one of the 9, and they actually call that. Well, it doesn't matter, but they would have preferred to join Switzerland actually after the first, which is I would have done it also if I would. But so why don't I like punishment? Do you really want me to go into punishment right now?
I don't want to disturb you.
So there was an experimental. There was an experimental confirmation of this idea in a paper that was published in Science by Klaus Wedekind and Manfred Milinski, where they just ask students. The students sit in front of a screen, and kind of obviously you have $1. Do you want to give $1 such that this person gets $4? And then this person has done the following things in the previous rounds. So then they find people help those who help others. You know, it's kind of not surprising. And helpful people have a higher payoff in the end. So if I begin to be helpful in this game, I will end up with a more.
So you just maintain this label, which is how helpful you are as you're playing.
Yeah, in some sense.
It increments, decrements.
I mean, if you really get into the mathematical analysis of indirect reciprocity, it's very complicated, you know, because it gets very complicated because for that reason actually. Yeah. So some people observe what is going on, and then the others have to learn it by gossip. But it could be that not everybody learns it. So then I know that he has done something good, but you don't know this. So then there are private lists of reputation. And this is what I analyzed in one of my first papers kind of numerically. But to calculate these things, that's very hard.
Am I allowed to sort of lie?
That's another interesting twist which hasn't been fully explored. In this gossip game, why would I tell the truth? Why would I say that this guy is a great guy, you know? That makes the gossip game itself a kind of prisoner's dilemma. So in one word, yes? Well, I mean, it could be that.
He doesn't believe in punishment.
No, I don't believe him. But there's work needed that analyzes the gossip level, sort of the deliberate deception in the gossip. You know, I haven't seen that. You know, I don't even know how to do that. But one thing that we did do is sort of that this gossip thing is like a voter model. So I don't know what the reputation of this person is. So I just ask somebody, and the person is good, so I adopt good. So then the reputation of everybody drifts around like in a voter model, and then can drift to good or drift to bad. So this is one thing that we did.
So this doesn't fit politics yet.
Why?
Because you try to destroy somebody's reputation if there's such a...
Oh, I see. That's right. So they would
Real politics.
That's right. Real politics. Yeah, that's right. Real politics. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Like Harry over there.
But in order, we need, for this to work, we need kind of language. So games of indirect reciprocity are cognitively demanding. Individuals need to monitor the social network of a group, and I think that's the right selection pressure for evolution of social intelligence. And then individuals must be able to talk to each other about others, and that's the evolution of human language. So like chimpanzees and so in animal communication, there's some communication going on. I think it's unclear. Nobody's ever observed that they can actually talk to each other about others.
But they still do cooperate.
They do cooperate, that's right. But they rely then on direct observation or on direct reciprocity.
Why do you need all this much communication? Why couldn't you get this, if I could just give you a few molecules of some good substance? That would be your reputation. You would carry them around.
It's a good idea. It's a good idea for social. It's a good idea. Yes, money. That's right. No, that's right. That's right. No, that's right. That's economists told me. Yeah, that's right. This reputation, money is a sign of reputation. So you do something to me, I give you money, and now you have the money.
Right. This is your counter that you're incrementing.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Money is much cruder than language,
Right. Squirrels have money.
But you know, here's something cool. My friend David Haig. David Haig is an evolutionary biologist in Harvard, and he said to me over lunch once, for direct reciprocity you need a face, for indirect reciprocity you need a name. And I like that, you know, that's very cool. You know, that statement is so cool because there's so much in our brain just in order to recognize faces. To recognize a face, that's a complicated feature, you know. Microsoft doesn't have a computer that can do it better than sort of the brain or can do it. And also to sort of read the intention of a person is sort of in the face, you know. But for indirect reciprocity, that's not enough. We also need like the name. I have to ask you, what did Bill do to you when you saw him? Something like that. Mm-hmm.
If I want to think that I'm strong, then I'm going to do,
Mm-hmm.
I can say I'm strong, but nobody will believe me unless I'm actually doing
Mm-hmm.
something where I'm generous man.
Mm-hmm.
And for this, you actually don't need a face, right? You don't need a name. It's enough that somebody, enough that the different animals recognize. So are these two processes,
No, but so then we are limited to a fairly small group where everybody has a chance to observe everybody else. And here, the group can be a bit bigger, and I can be informed about encounters between others,
Yeah, because otherwise you wouldn't, you just see like one animal growling at another, and you know that the animal that they're growling at probably did something bad to them, but it's only their small circle that sees that.
So the mathematics of this is much more complicated than direct reciprocity, but there's a simple rule. And the simple rule is the probability to know someone's reputation has to exceed the cost to benefit ratio. You must have some chance to be informed about the other person. If it's too anonymous, there's no chance.
Right, because otherwise the information is going to die out.
Yeah, that's right. So here basically I proposed 3 theories so far: kin selection, which I find a bit weird, but then direct reciprocity and indirect reciprocity, which I specifically want to think for humans. And now we come to the more general things like evolutionary graph theory, spatial games, and you will see. So I call this now spatial selection. And I will talk about spatial games, games on graphs, games in phenotype space, and games on sets. And these spatial games, the idea would be the first thing that we did is there was a lattice. And in this lattice, there are players, and players play with their neighbors. And when you do this, what you get is beautiful stuff. And there are like deterministic update rules and deterministic cellular automata, and they can like unfold these complicated patterns where very little can be calculated. So for like a long time, we just watched things unfolding here. And the only calculation we had is actually that in patterns like this here, or like in here or here, the average frequency of cooperators in blue is 12 times logarithm 2 minus 8. That was very surprising, but we couldn't calculate anything else, and we don't really know why that actually worked so well.
So what's the rule here? What do
The people are on a lattice, and they play with their neighbors. So I play it, so you can define your neighborhood. So there could be the von Neumann neighborhood or the Moore neighborhood. So I play with everybody else. Then everybody has a payoff, and now you have to define an update rule. And one update rule that you need for these beautiful pictures, actually it's a deterministic update rule. So among all my neighbors, who has the highest payoff, and I will take it. It's a deterministic update rule. Then you can have stochastic update rules. I will take the neighbor proportionally. The game of life is a deterministic cellular automaton, but the rules by Conway, they were sort of constructed to get complicated outcome. And here we have rules that are very natural, and we get complicated. We also have actually gliders here. We cannot, that is a collision of 2 gliders actually leading to this explosion. But these rules are very natural. You just play games, you reproduce according to fitness, you get this kind of behavior. For deterministic update rules, later we move to stochastic update rules. So, yes?
There's a reason why you're getting all these end of life equivalent things.
I know in the deterministic rule how to get complexity, and it is very simple actually. You have to ask yourself what's the fate of a cluster, say, of cooperators. And the cluster, it grows at the corner, but it loses on the line. And that gives rise to dynamic fractals. We call this dynamic fractals. So they're very simple. We can calculate the parameter regions. We know which parameter regions are kind of complicated. But this is something we did much more recently, games on graphs. So now the lattices, that's just a special case. We can have any graph here now, like a random graph or scale-free, and then each node here, the vertex of the graph is an individual, and the individual can play one of 2 strategies, and you play with all your neighbors. And now you get a fitness. And now you have to make a choice what the update rule on the graph is. And that is very important because different update rules lead to very different outcomes. So one update rule, we call it birth-death. This means you pick from the population at random, proportional to payoff, an individual, say that one, and it will reproduce, and the offspring replaces at random a neighbor. That's called birth-death updating. Birth-death updating does not get you evolution on graphs, evolution of cooperation on graphs. Birth-death updating on a graph, for us, it behaves like a well-mixed population. Death-birth updating is at random an individual dies, and now the neighbors compete for the empty site. And that allows evolution of cooperation, for example.
And how did you pick the site to begin with?
At random.
The other one.
So yeah, that's proportional to fitness. So at random a guy dies and the neighbors compete proportional to fitness. That's what we call this death-birth updating. And death-birth updating allows evolution of cooperation on a graph. But birth-death updating destroys the space. I mean, the spatial structure has no consequence for these games that we study.
Can you prove that? Or
Yes. We can prove such. So here we can calculate many things. So this is the idea. The cooperators pay, for example, Prisoner's Dilemma. We can study any game. But Prisoner's Dilemma, cooperators pay a cost C, and for each neighbor to receive a benefit B. So it's very simple how the payoffs are allocated. And now for the update rule, you have to make choices. And there's one thing I also want to tell you. You can also study a situation where there's one graph for playing the game and another graph for the updating. So we call these games on two graphs. And we can also calculate things there. But it's not logically necessary to have just one graph. So I can actually get my fitness from interaction with, say, my students, but I have to compete with other professors also. In the sense that for two things, so local is how do I get my payoff? My payoff is only derived from my neighbors, not from everybody else. And I also compete with my neighbors for updating.
Right, but so depending on how well connected the graph is to the phenomena that you see.
So of course, so like the cycle is like the most structured of these things that we study. And like the complete graph is equivalent to the well-mixed population. So the well-mixed population is a special case of evolutionary graph theory. We always have to check that we get the right answer.
A sufficient number of long edges in there, you probably have to do the same thing as the complete graph or not?
Yes.
It's kind of a small world type graph and you're going to head to the same.
Well, the small world, I can show you how we get evolution of cooperation actually. So now we study, for example, the cycle. We study the lattice. We study random regular graphs. We study random graphs and we study scale-free networks. And in all of this, we check cooperators versus defectors for different cost-to-benefit ratios. And Christoph Howard did these Swiss-made computer simulations. And when we looked at these simulations, we realized that there's something kind of simple going on, something surprisingly simple, because I hadn't seen anything simple in these spatial games ever before. But what we found there was then, which was proven by Hisashi Otsuki, a very simple rule. And this is graph selection favors cooperation if the benefit to cost ratio is greater than the average number of neighbors. And this is the average number of neighbors. And the proof of this is actually complicated. He uses pairwise pair approximation and diffusion approximation. Yes.
It's a bit confusing because we can have two graphs, right? One is dense, another one is sparse, and they're not connected or loosely connected. And then,
So first of all, the theory works. The theory uses pair approximation, which is known to work well for random regular graphs. So what we really can prove is actually for regular graphs. For regular graphs, we can kind of prove this. But for heterogeneous graphs, approximately this holds, and then there's an error correction here. But it really depends on how heterogeneous your graph is. So,
Okay, so that's your sparse versus dense.
No. So for example, there's like, so.
you probably have some sort of perfect mixture. So for example, you get a random graph that you see.
So basically, I cannot we have not proven this for non-regular graphs. So we have proven this for regular graphs. We have observed it for many non-regular graphs also. We know that for benign non-regular graphs, it more or less holds, and there's some variation term here. But I can construct counterexamples.
When you say regular, do you mean random regular graphs?
Any regular.
Any regular?
Yes, so any regular is of...
What if I take unions of regular graphs? Just disconnected unions of many regular graphs?
No, so the population, the graph should be a connected graph, otherwise we do not have the possibility that a single mutant takes over the population. We need to have one population. So if you have two populations, then we would study each population separately.
And what if I have sort of a graph, sort of it's almost disconnected, I sort of have some high conductance?
You already said you can construct counterexamples, so you're trying to construct one as, you're trying to construct a counterexample on a regular graph.
Just the bias doesn't work out. This takes too long to merge.
Yeah.
Hmm? Pair approximation. It uses pair approximation. So this agreement between the numerical simulations and the theory is best for random regular graphs, and then it can like for the cycle or for lattices, you have some, but for the scale free you can get discrepancy. But the discrepancy seems to be small when you increase the population size. So there's a variation term there which is somehow controlled by the population size. But we don't have beautiful results for heterogeneous graphs. There's only one result by Peter Taylor in this direction actually. So that's a surprisingly simple rule. That rule is sort of nothing could be simpler than this. It was amazing that something like this could actually be the answer. And that is for this death birth updating, for death birth updating.
It's not even on the right? It's one direction.
No. It's so then basically it says on average cooperators are more abundant than defectors if this is the case. And if this is not the case, the defectors are more abundant. So now, that was evolutionary graph theory. Then we began to work on what we call games in phenotype space. This is another kind of spatial model that we studied. This is how it works. So we have some phenotype space which can be one-dimensional or many dimensions, but let's suppose it's one-dimensional. And I interact with people, I cooperate with people if they are close in phenotype space. And if somebody is far in phenotype space, I defect. So I can play this conditional strategy. And then you reproduce proportional to your fitness, and your offspring inherits your phenotype to some degree. So there's some mutation here. So in this model, and this was published, this is Dieber's work and came out in PNAS just recently. The population diffuses in phenotype space, but somehow stays as one cluster. Occasionally the population breaks into clusters, but it comes together again. One cluster dies out, another cluster survives. So there's a spatial effect here in how you determine your payoff, but there is global updating. So in the graph theory, you have locality for determining payoff and locality for the competition. But here you have locality for determining payoff, but then the next generation is sampled randomly from everybody. So that's what we call global updating. In that system here, spatial is important for how to determine payoff, but when it comes to competition, everybody competes with everybody else for the resources.
And you say this can also be done in more than one dimension?
Yes. So higher dimensions and infinitely many dimensions, but for one-dimensional games in phenotype space, in the limit of, say, weak selection, large population size, and then in the right mutation rate. So the mutation rate between cooperators and defectors is actually going to zero. Dieber proved a very beautiful formula, and this is that cooperators are favored if the benefit to cost ratio is greater than 1 plus 2 over the square root of 3. So the answer here depends only on the dimension. I think so for dimension 1, that's the answer. For dimension 2, there should be another answer, and we also know the answer for infinitely many dimensions. But really to understand the complexity of this, Tibor has to give like a seminar on this, which would be great, because for me it's a new type of spatial model, because it's not physical space, it's a clustering according to phenotype space. And my behavior depends on this phenotypic distance. So there's like strategy, how to play the game, and in addition to strategy, there's how do people look like. And then the strategies are conditional on how people look like. And we can play any game here, not just the prisoner's dilemma, but it started with the analysis of the prisoner's dilemma. So then, another framework which we are very excited by this, we call it evolutionary set theory. So here we say people belong to sets. People interact with others in the same sets. People adopt strategy and set memberships of successful individuals. So that's the new thing here, you know. So they say one set is Microsoft, you know. Another set is say Harvard, then MIT or Cambridge, you know. And then people belong to these sets, and they preferentially interact with others who are in that set. And then they get a payoff. Then everybody gets a payoff, and now we kind of meet. You know, we meet in that model, we meet somehow somewhere, you know. And I ask, what strategy do you have? And what are your sets, you know? And then if this person is really doing well, I try to adopt strategy or set membership or both. And that means successful strategies. Well, we can do different instantiations of the model, but the important thing is that also set memberships. So successful strategies reproduce by imitation, but successful sets attract more members. And I thought
and
this...
it doesn't just go towards some fixed point where everybody's in the same set?
Well, that depends on the mutation rate between sets. We have here mutation rate between sets. And if the mutation rate between sets goes to 0, then everybody will be in the same sets.
So this gets like groups.
It also depends on the strategy. When you have all operators, they all tend to be in the same set together who benefit from playing with each other. If you have all defectors, they tend to spread out. That's their strategy, to cover as much ground as possible to find an operator.
So
This gets close to group selection.
well, I will talk about group selection also. For me, there's a reason why that is actually not group selection, why group selection is another mechanism, is because there's only individuals who compete with each other. For group selection, I also want competition between the groups. So I could put group selection onto this also, where say sets compete with each other. But I don't have that yet.
But here the payoff is just to the individual.
The payoff is to the individual, and the individual imitates other individuals. And so I thought this is a cool way to describe human population structure, the structure of human society, you know, because we do belong to sets. And also in our graph theory, you know, the graph was static. There's a static graph, and evolution happens on a static graph. And here, at any one time you have a graph, but the graph changes. It is evolution a dynamical graph. Because I join your set, and now the graph has actually changed. So this is a dynamic graph theory. This is one version of a dynamic graph theory which we could study. So I was very excited, and I proposed it to Corinna as a project, and I thought it would be so complicated I could only do computer simulation, but working with Tibor, Corinna actually solved it. So we have a complete analytic description for this evolution on sets, and the parameters that you have here is the number of people, the number of sets, set membership per person, strategy mutation rate, set mutation rate.
So you have a fixed number of set memberships per person.
Yeah, that's something which we don't really like, but we have to have it in order to calculate
so
something.
if I'm taking after so if I say, oh, your set is doing well, then I have to drop.
You are right, that's right. That's what we have. Because otherwise we don't really know how to calculate it, but we would consider it a bit more realistic to say you can be everybody can have up to 5 sets. You know, that would be cool. That would be cool. But here we have everybody is exactly 5 sets, so everybody is exactly 1 set, you know, 2 sets.
Anyone can be as many sets as they want. There is no evolution of cooperation. So if we can have k equals
Then the defectors
Right,
just...
because then why not just adopt it? Yeah.
yeah, so you don't have to have a cap. It's just
I mean,
that it has to be equal to k.
So the cool thing is that we get from this, so Corinna that has a perfect analytic answer where you get the well-mixed population in various limits.
I don't think it's so unreasonable, though, in the following sense. I believe that everything would head might tend towards something where you all have this maximum number, and you can say, okay, well now I'm looking at it there. But my intuition would be that you would go to whatever that maximum number was.
Or would you want to say there's a cost associated?
We can do that.
Okay, and then that would be more correct. Yeah.
But so the thing is that we have an answer here that is actually for any population size, for any number of sets. We don't have to have a limit of infinitely large population. But the equation that is the answer is complicated. So in certain limits, we can study simpler equation. And in one particular limit, we get a very simple answer. And this is the benefit to cost ratio is greater than 1 plus 2 over the square root of set memberships per person over the total number of sets. And we can also do one complication of this, which we find interesting, and this is I cooperate with you only if we have, say, 2 sets in common, or if we have 3 sets in common. So I have at least. And that therefore we have this effective set membership here. And that is a very successful way to get cooperation actually in that system. It's like the games in phenotype space, we have here local structure for getting payoff, but global updating. In graph theory, both was local.
What happens if you vary the number of sets that are required to interact? Because you can sort of replace K set memberships with like K characteristics in common, and then vary your propensity to deal with people.
That's a good idea. So there are different strategies in there that have a different threshold for triggering cooperation. We haven't done that.
This may not be a fair question, but it's still not all the questions we seem to have heard. But you have all these models, and then eventually you calculate this ratio of B over C. Why is this central question?
No, let me.
How do you learn from getting like this 1 plus 2 is good?
No, actually, because the talk is about evolution of cooperation. What I want to communicate is, if you're interested in evolution of cooperation, you always want to calculate the benefit to cost ratio. But whenever we do such a theory, we want to study it for any game. We actually know how to play any game for these things. And I think maybe that's my next slide. Yeah, that's my next slide.
Okay, and we should
Break it like half an hour. No, I will be finished soon. Okay, I will finish soon. So this is the
I'm
sigma.
not so sure of the cost-benefit ratio for this.
Yeah, I will finish soon. So we have this, because we can actually study different games. So here is just, we call it the sigma theorem. It was also proven by Corina in her PhD thesis. It's for any game. So a game is given by a payoff matrix. And we want to know when is A more abundant than B. For weak selection, on any structure, that is the answer. There's a parameter sigma, which depends on the process, on the structure, but not on this ABCD. So the population structure of the evolutionary dynamics, and so it can all be summarized by one parameter. And we are so interested in that parameter. And the next thing is, that parameter corresponds to the critical benefit to cost ratio. If you know the critical benefit to cost ratio, we can give you the parameter. If we know the parameter, we also know the critical benefit to cost ratio. So that decides actually any game. That's why it's so cool here. Why is it a linear condition? The intuition is it's linear because we have weak selection. Weak selection makes things linear. And somehow there's a symmetry that we would expect. The spatial process doesn't introduce asymmetries between the strategies. Therefore, the condition must look something like this. So the well-mixed population has sigma equals 1. And if sigma equals 1, that's the famous concept of risk dominance. This is risk dominance. Now, structure usually increases sigma factors larger than 1. Larger than 1 means that the diagonal entries are more important. That means, for example, in a coordination game, structure favors Pareto efficiency over risk dominance. And any process, has a sigma. For any model that we can think of, because it's a very general proof, we can ask, what's the sigma? There's another paper by Cantori, a famous paper by Cantori, Maillard, Robb. Their sigma is n minus 2 over n. For the graphs, our sigma was k plus 1 divided by k minus 1. For the set, there's a sigma. Sigma 1, that's the well-mixed population, large well-mixed population. So please invite Corina to give a talk on this. And very, very, very quickly, just the last thing I want to say is group selection. The beautiful quote by Darwin, there can be no doubt that a tribe, including many members who are always ready to give aid to each other and to sacrifice themselves for the common good, would be victorious over other tribes, and this would be natural selection. So he finds it very natural to talk about natural selection when there's competition between tribes, which later was actually very much rejected as an idea because there must always be competition between individuals only. So that's a simple model of group selection for which we also could get an analytic answer, but you actually have groups divide when reaching a certain size, and therefore groups that grow faster, they divide more often, and so. And we can also calculate the benefit to cost ratio here, which with Corina's theorem is also a sigma. There will be a sigma for group selection there. And that's my summary. So there were 5 mechanisms for the evolution of cooperation: kin selection, direct reciprocity, indirect spatial selection, and group selection. And for all of this, there's kind of a simple rule. And I always had here this benefit to cost ratio greater than k, but maybe somehow we should, for the spatial selection, the rule formulate in terms of sigma actually. The spatial process leads to a sigma, and then the BC ratio has to be greater than that number. And let's ignore this. And then these are the people of BD who are the cooperators, whom I thank very much. And I thank you for giving me so much time to talk.